Robert De Niro is under a barrage of criticism. Why did the Hollywood legend risk everything for his daughter? Before we get to the video, please write what state you are watching this video from, and now let's dive in. Robert De Niro sat in a Manhattan talk show studio, facing host Elaine Marshall, known for her directness. Lately, X had been buzzing with discussions about his daughter, Erin, who had openly come out as transgender. Elaine smiled, holding a tablet with notes. "Robert, your new film is already being called a return to the classics. What's it like to be on set at this age?" Robert leaned back in his chair, his eyes sparking. "Like an old boxer in the ring, Elaine. I've still got the punches, but now I aim sharper." The audience laughed. A woman in a checkered jacket in the front row whispered to her friend, "He hasn't changed." A man in a denim jacket behind nodded, recalling Raging Bull. Elaine flipped through her notes. "You've worked with young directors. What do you think of the new generation in Hollywood?" "They're fast," Robert replied. "Everything's shot on computers, not film. But some forget that movies aren't about tech, they're about soul. I tell them, turn off the screens, talk to people." The audience applauded. Elaine nodded, her smile widening. "What about politics? You've always been outspoken. What do you think of America today?" Robert rubbed his chin. "America's like an old bar where everyone's shouting, but no one's listening. Everybody wants to be right, but few want to understand the other guy. I got tired of that back in the 70s. Laughter mixed with applause. The woman in the checkered jacket leaned to her friend. "He's saying what we think." The man in the denim jacket muttered, "Exactly, none of that woke nonsense." Elaine changed the topic. "You grew up in New York. How has the city changed since your youth?" Robert smiled, his eyes warming. "Back then, Manhattan was rough, real. Little Italy smelled of sauce and cigars. Now it's all coffee shops and skyscrapers. But the spirit's still there. New York still beats like a heart." The audience erupted in applause. Elaine raised a hand to continue. "One last question, Robert. You're an icon. What would you say to a young actor just starting out?" "Be real," he said. "The camera sees everything. If you're lying, the audience will feel it." The audience gave a standing ovation. Elaine thanked him, and the show ended on a high note. But backstage, tension began to brew. She set aside her tablet, her smile thinner, almost challenging. "Robert, you talk about listening, about dialogue. Let's make it personal. Your daughter, Erin, recently spoke openly about her transgender journey. For many of your fans, especially the older generation, it's been, let's say, a surprise. Some say it's hard to understand. As a father, how do you respond to those sentiments?" He leaned toward the microphone, his voice calm but profound. "Erin is my daughter, and she's one of the bravest people I know. When she told me about herself, I didn't think about what people would say or how they'd take it. I thought about her, about how to make sure she feels safe, knows I'm with her. If someone finds that hard to understand, I'd say, try understanding the person, not the label." The audience erupted in applause, though not everyone joined in. Elaine raised a hand to continue. "Those are strong words, Robert. But your fans, who grew up with your films, often talk about traditional values, family, morality. Some feel that supporting changes, like Erin's, contradicts what you stood for in your roles. How would you respond to them?" Robert looked at her, his eyes narrowing, but he stayed composed. "My roles? They were about people fighting for what matters to them. To me, family isn't some 1950s postcard. It's love, support, even when the world's against you. If someone thinks supporting my kid is contradicting values, maybe they need to rethink what values are." Applause rolled through the room, but the tension didn't ease. Elaine flipped through her notes, her voice softer but laced with subtext. "You talk about love for your daughter, and that resonates. But let's be honest, society is divided. On X, people write that your stance feels like support for a progressive agenda. Others say you're just a father standing by his child. How do you balance those perceptions?" Robert smiled, but his smile carried weariness. I don't balance, Elaine. I'm not a politician or a preacher. I'm a father. If someone sees a progressive agenda in that, that's their problem, not mine. My job is to be there for Aaron, not to justify myself to people who want labels. The audience buzzed again, applause mixed with whispers. Elaine nodded, sensing the conversation had hit a peak. Robert, you're giving us a lot to think about. Let's take another quick break, and we'll come back to your thoughts on modernity, and, perhaps, a bit more about your family. Robert nodded, stood, and headed to the green room, feeling tension pulsing in his temples. In the green room, he sat, grabbing a glass of water. His agent, Mark, walked in, holding a phone. Bob, you've got them stirred up. X is on fire. Some call you a hero. Others say you've gone liberal. There's an invite to a radio show. Listeners over 55, conservative, ready for a fight. You want in? In? He echoed, his voice quiet but resolute. I'm not just going, Mark. I'm going to tell them everything they need to hear. Mark nodded, but his face stayed serious. All right, but brace yourself. They won't be as gentle as Elaine. Robert returned to the studio. The audience greeted him with applause, but the air was thick with tension. Elaine, holding her tablet, dove right in. Robert, we talked about Aaron and your stance as a father. Let's look broader. Many of your fans feel society is changing too fast. Gender, identity, culture. Some even see it as a threat to their way of life. What would you say to those who fear these changes? Robert leaned into the microphone, his voice firm but calm. Fear's a lousy guide. I've seen America change dozens of times. Every time, someone thought the world would fall apart. Guess what? We're still here. If we want things to be better, we don't fear, we talk. We listen. We try to understand. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's the only way. The audience erupted in applause. Elaine prepared her next question as the backstage screen lit up with X comments. He talks like a real man, wrote one. He sold out to new trends, countered another. Elaine raised a hand to continue. Robert, that's a powerful stance. But let me ask, was it hard for you to accept Aaron's journey? Many parents of your generation struggle with these changes. Did you ever hesitate? Robert paused for a moment. His gaze dropped to his hands, fingers tightening slightly. The audience fell silent, sensing the weight of the moment. He looked up, tears glistening in his eyes, but his voice stayed steady. Hard? Of course it was. Not because I didn't love her. Because I was scared for her. The world can be cruel, Elaine. And I didn't want my daughter to suffer. But when she told me who she is, I realized, if I don't stand by her, who will? And I promised myself I'd never let her feel alone. The audience froze, then erupted in applause, louder than ever. Even the woman in the checkered jacket clapped, albeit reluctantly. The man in the denim jacket nodded, his face softening. Elaine, visibly moved, nodded. Robert, that's incredibly powerful. Thank you for your honesty. The show ended in a wave of applause. Robert stood, adjusted his jacket, and headed to the green room, emotions still churning in his chest. In the green room, Robert sat, holding a glass of water. Mark walked in, phone in hand. Bob, you tore it up. X is exploding. People say they cried with you. But there's backlash, especially from conservatives. And that radio invite, listeners over 55, tough crowd. You going? Robert glanced at a photo of Aaron. He was laughing on the beach, holding his hand, still a kid. He recalled her words. Dad, I just want to be me. Going? He said. If even one person gets it, it's worth it. The next day, Robert walked into an old Brooklyn radio studio. It smelled of coffee and wood. The host, Joe Carter, with a booming voice and conservative views, shook his hand. Robert, our listeners are straight shooters. Ready for candor? I'm here for it, Robert replied, sitting at the microphone. The broadcast started with film questions, but Joe soon cut to the chase, reading a listener's message. Mr. De Niro, I respect your movies, but your support for transgender issues feels like a betrayal of our values. Why'd you choose this path? Robert leaned into the mic. I didn't choose a path. I chose my daughter. Erin's not a value or an issue. She's a person. And if you think loving your kid is betrayal, I don't know what family means to you. The screen lit up with messages. He's a real dad, wrote one listener. But another was harsh. De Niro's sold out to new trends. Joe read another. How do you deal with so many of us, your fans, disagreeing with you? Robert smiled, but his eyes welled up again. I don't deal. I talk. And I hope you're listening. Not to agree with me, but to see that behind every disagreement is someone's kid, someone's truth. Joe cleared his throat, sensing the rising tension. Robert, we've got more questions. Keep going? Absolutely, Robert said. I'm ready. The broadcast continued, each question sharper than the last. But Robert answered calmly, with dignity, speaking of Erin, love, and the need to listen. Some listeners stayed unmoved, but others wrote, I don't agree, but I respect him for it. That evening, Robert sat in his Manhattan apartment. City lights flickered outside, his phone in hand, scrolling through X. Messages poured in. Support, criticism. But one stood out. I'm 68, I don't get transgender stuff, but your tears for your daughter made me think. Thanks for showing what a father is, wrote a woman named N. Robert felt tears well up again. He hadn't changed everyone's mind, but he'd planted a seed of understanding. Erin called later, her voice trembling with emotion. Dad, I watched the show. Thank you for just being you. Always, he replied, his voice breaking. He hung up and looked out at the city. The world was still divided, but every step, every word, was a small victory. Not for everyone, but for those ready to listen. And that was enough to keep going.